This task was appointed to you, Frodo of the Shire. If you do not find a way, no one will.
In a world of unparalleled scope and grandeur, J.R.R. Tolkien's epic of good and evil reaches a dramatic and emotional conclusion in Peter Jackson's climactic film.
The board is set. The pieces are moving.
These are extraordinary times that Gandalf and the rest are living through.
We come to it at last.
Can they survive? Can they live up to their responsibilities?
This is your test. Every path you have trod through wilderness, through war, has led to this road.
Aragorn has been on a journey through the first two movies towards his taking of the throne of Gondor.
Put aside the ranger. Become who you were born to be.
It's not an easy journey for Aragorn because he essentially doesn't have faith that he is doing the right thing by becoming the rightful king.
I know this Aragorn.
I will not bow to this ranger from the north.
Authority is not given to you to deny the return of the king.
The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. 8 years in the making. 3 record-breaking motion pictures. 1 vision.
And cut. Good. Good. The Return of the King, in being the climax, is naturally the most emotional of the 3. The journeys that these characters have been going on, what they care about, what they've been fighting for, even what some of their friends have died for, is all leading to the events that are taking place in this film.
Return of the King really is the jewel in the crown.
It's a massive payoff because these characters that you've watched over the course of 2 films have to go to the ends of their abilities.
The longer that Frodo is in possession of this ring, the more Frodo suffers.
The tension in all storylines is at its absolute peak.
This is where the characters meet their final test. This is where it could all end.
What you find in these movies, and Return of the King especially, is its basic human emotional stuff, if you like.
It's made up of all the same elements that are important in life. Friendship, loyalty, compassion, love.
They're all things that we would ourselves like to aspire to and would hope that we would behave in this way if we found ourselves in the same circumstances.
And I think that is why you have this extraordinary magnetic appeal to the audience. They are drawn into it.
The film saga has been received in triumph around the world, so it's astonishing to remember that the epic story really began back in the 1930s at the writing table of a professor of Anglo-Saxon at Oxford University, John Ronald Reuel Tolkien.
Tolkien wrote the book as a mythic prehistory. It was supposed to take place in a Europe that existed in a dark age that we've long since forgotten.
Hail the victorious dead!
The people and places of Middle-earth are deeply rooted in Tolkien's love of old languages and cultures. This makes The Lord of the Rings feel like actual history.
I think Professor Tolkien had an understanding that to have this good green earth, someone fought for it, and that is actually true throughout history.
Tolkien was involved in the First World War, and he was writing The Lord of the Rings during the Second World War. He was aware of huge events and huge themes in which small people take part.
It took Tolkien more than 16 years to finish the 1,200-page story, published in the mid-1950s in 3 parts.
Tolkien hated the idea, but we thought that if you had 3 parts, this would be a way of keeping suspense going.
Almost at once, people wanted to turn The Lord of the Rings into a movie. But with such a complex and personal book, that was easier said than done.
Tolkien himself was quite happy at the idea of a movie being made of The Lord of the Rings. He just wanted it to be made well.
Tolkien strongly disliked the treatment for an animated film he read in the 1950s. In the 60s, the Oxford Don refused to let the Beatles make a movie, with Paul as Frodo, Ringo as Sam, George as Gandalf, and John as Gollum. More than 100 million people have read the trilogy. One of them was an 18-year-old aspiring filmmaker in New Zealand named Peter Jackson.
I read the book and I thought, wow, this will make a great film. I can't wait till it comes out. You know, I can't wait till somebody else makes it. And that was as far as my kind of thinking went at that stage. I never ever dreamt it would be me doing it, not in a million years.
2 decades later, Jackson had established his reputation with innovative films like Heavenly Creatures. Now, he dreamed of bigger challenges.
Down in New Zealand, we'd set up this little company called Weta, and we had like about 30 computers, and we were doing these ghost effects for this movie we were making. And it was a realization that we had arrived at a time when just about anything you could imagine was possible to put on film. That then led me to think, well, okay, if anything is possible, what has always been thought to have been impossible? And I thought The Lord of the Rings.
Jackson and his co-writers crafted a screenplay that squeezed the 3 books into 2 movies. They never thought a Hollywood studio would risk making 3 such films. But Jackson got a surprise when he showed a 35-minute demo reel to co-chairman Bob Shaye and Michael Lynn at New Line Cinema.
It was animated storyboards, it was early CGI tests, it was interviews with various department heads, and it was just an absolutely comprehensive execution of vision. You could see clearly what the film was going to be. And when the sort of lights came up, Bob was sort of sitting there nodding and thinking, and first words out of his mouth were, aren't there 3 books? You should make 3.
And that was it, you know? That was like 5 minutes, and we were now making 3 films.
It was a dream come true, but it meant a page 1 rewrite.
For the 3 of us trying to grapple with this story, it's about just making the damn thing work on film.
It's a very complicated book that relies on a huge amount of backstory, which reads very much like a historical sort of volume. And that's fine for a book, but it's very hard to put into screen, except without it, you can't really tell the story properly. The multitude of characters is also difficult.
You've got to try and care about so many people for the different journeys that the individual characters are going on.
It was like this immense jigsaw puzzle that we had to somehow fit the pieces together and end up with something that felt like it was worthy of the title, The Lord of the Rings.
Now, Jackson threw himself into every aspect of the production with a passion that inspired everyone around him.
We've got 3 units going on at the same time, one behind me, one here and one over there. So it's quite good, lots of extras, and I'm just hoping we get a point in the day when all 3 cameras are rolling at exactly the same time on all 3 units, which would be quite good.
He's very secure in his own talent, and I think that means that he can embrace other people's.
And then you say, on the third,
and that stops me.
Well, we can try that. We can try that. Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
As a young boy, I think he very quickly got his head around what he was good at.
You ask a tricky one just when the camera's on.
Oh, God. But you always have the answers.
He liked movies, he got a camera, and he just started making films.
Good. Cut.
He has developed this sort of team of people and this way of working, and it hasn't come from being told how to do it by other people explaining how it's done. He's discovered it for himself.
This job could be a burden, just like The Ring, but he chose for it not to be, and he chose for it to be something that he carried lightly, you know, with a lot of humour.
Even as the 3 scripts were coming together, Jackson had to find the right actors to bring Tolkien's characters to life.
Any story you tell depends on 2 things. One, the story itself and a great script. And the other thing is a well-cast movie so that you react to an emotionally moving performance. And all the rest of it is really the icing on the cake.
Jackson had to fill more than 100 speaking parts. And he was well aware that everybody who had read the books had their own ideas of how Tolkien's people should look and sound.
We were finding actors to represent some of the most beloved characters in history. So we felt that responsibility acutely, and we spent a lot of time trying to find people who just felt right. That we were literally said that we wanted our actors to feel like they stepped out of the pages of the book.
I think that everybody can find a character in The Lord of the Rings that they relate to or feel for the most, if not one, many.
What are we holding on to, Sam? That there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
Frodo had the sort of burden and the responsibility of carrying this ring, and I had the burden and responsibility of seeing this character through, which was, at the time, quite scary, because it's a character that millions of people know and love, and if I'd gotten it wrong, that would have been a great tragedy, and I certainly didn't want to get it wrong.
Good.
And I definitely felt the weight of that responsibility.
At the time, nobody in The Lord of the Rings was a big box office name. Instead, Jackson put together an ensemble cast from a wide variety of backgrounds. He showed a knack for spotting new talent.
I was coming to the end of my third year at the Guildhall School in London, School of Music and Drama. So I read for Legolas, and I got offered the role just 2 days before I finished school.
Anything to make him look a little less non-human.
The ring will come to him sooner or later.
The acclaimed Shakespearean actor Sir Ian McKellen seemed like the ideal Gandalf. Ironically, he had never read the books.
Bollocks.
But then he started to read, and he really became, you know, very quickly a Tolkien expert. And Ian would often walk on set clutching a copy of the book, you know, and he'd be sort of opening up to certain pages. He was really determined that Gandalf had to be the Gandalf that Tolkien wrote.
How do we know Frodo is alive?
What does your heart tell you?
I think of him as very real. I know what he ate for breakfast. I know what his appetite's like. I know every ache and pain of his body. And it reminds me of a long-held aim as an actor to only play good parts. Because the better the part, the better the actor.
To become at home in Tolkien's Middle-earth, most of the lead actors had to learn the finer points of swordsmanship and screen combat.
I came here for 3 weeks before we started shooting, working with the stunt guys and working on a choreographed fight and also just working on the basic moves. And in the end, when we were shooting it on set, Peter said to me, "Oh, you know, it doesn't look really like you're slashing him there. I think you'll really have to hit him." So he had me full on hitting everybody.
Just remember, pain is temporary, film is forever.
I've gotten hurt several times in this movie, but that's what happens when you throw yourself into it.
But Jackson needed more from his actors than talent and physical ability.
The other completely unrelated thing, which was also important, was that we wanted to make sure they were actually nice people, which sounds very silly, but they were people that we were going to have to work with for what has been 3 years. Unfortunately, in every case, we were lucky. I mean, we got it right. They've been the most wonderful cast.
We see her coming up behind.
For 3 years, Jackson worked with his cast to bring his vision to life, scene by scene, take by take.
Okay, one more. Just one more, though. That was good.
He's incredibly exacting and a perfectionist, which I admire and warm to. But he's very good-humoured, and I think that is absolutely vital in a director who is tackling these stories.
He knows what he wants. He knows how the character should evolve, and, you know, I go along with that.
I think he knows where acting comes from, and he knows how to kind of tap into that. And because he gets to know us, he knows how to get the best performance out of every actor individually.
And then do you not know? It has to be very vulnerable, a very vulnerable, soft line. It's sort of a very honest line.
He definitely has the ability to add that one comment or a suggestion that will make it work completely for that given moment or that interaction between characters. Why have you come?
Do you not know?
There's never a moment that, as an actor, you second-guess what's being done or why it's being done. It's all about trying to give Peter what it is that he wants and how to keep that consistent with the power of the books.
I've read them, you know, hundreds of times, literally, word for word. You could look as you're scrabbling as if you're sort of kicking it and pushing it, kicking on. I mean, just... Before we shoot a scene in the film, I usually go back over the book and actually read the chapter from the book.
It took a tremendous commitment from Jackson, his actors, and his crew to shoot 3 movies out of sequence, all at the same time, and stay focused.
I think over the course of the 3 films and all of the principal photography, the thing that struck me most about Peter was his ability to maintain first his energy and his enthusiasm, as well as his ability to never lose sight of where these films were going.
For Jackson, the final goal was never in doubt.
There was this aura about Return of the King that was quite special. I mean, obviously, we were skipping around quite a lot, but whenever it came to doing something from film 3, there was this kind of excitement.
The men have found their captain. They will follow you into battle, even to death. You have given us hope. This is where the characters are pushed to the brink. This is where Aragorn must decide whether he is the king or not.
I see in your eyes the same fear that would take the heart of me.
The Return of the King is the reason why you make the first two films. You know, you make the Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers because you want to get to the Return of the King. That's the whole point.
A day may come when the courage of men failed, but it is not this day. This day we fight!
Is there any hope, Gandalf, for Frodo and Sam?
There never was much hope. Just a fool's hope.
We have created a film that has a feeling that it takes place in a real place.
Some of that reality came from the magnificent locations of Jackson's native country.
Sometimes when you go to places, you feel, oh, I've been here before. I felt about New Zealand, I've never been here before.
But much of Tolkien's world had to be built by hand.
That looks good. Yeah.
Nyla Dixon assembled a costume team that created more than 15,000 garments.
I always wanted the wardrobe to feel more historically based and fantasy based. I just wanted it to have an organic reality.
It's just pretty tatty. You've worn it all your life. You've worn it for 30 years.
Nyla Dixon hasn't dressed the hobbits in any materials that the culture of the hobbits would be unable to produce. Then at the same time, she's been able to use some wonderful fabrics and looks for the elves.
As a costumer, the best thing that you could do was to try and involve the actor in the development of that character through the costume.
I was just fascinated by what she was doing, and to learn how to understand. I mean, it was like just a piece of fabric laid over me with a hole cut out for my head, and then we had to figure out this shape. And then I would go away and come back, and they would have created this, you know, incredible masterpiece.
And action!
The costumes that I wear, 3 layers that you never see the 2 layers underneath, but the 2 layers underneath are utterly beautiful.
Put it on a slight tilt to one side and it'll keep the arrow firmly on your hand.
Richard Taylor supervised the weapons and armor used in the film. Over the course of production, Taylor's team crafted 10,000 arrows, 48,000 weapons, shields, and scabbards, and 12 million links of chainmail.
No buckle is not branded with the code of arms of a particular army. Every belt is hand-tooled, and in doing this process, the audience hopefully will gain a richer perspective of the cultures that have gone on for thousands of years to generate the moment in time that we are shown in the period of the film.
This passionate attention to detail in production design was more than just eye candy for the audience.
Erwin presents it to Theoden, who basically, yeah, it's a real thing.
Yeah. To have it really there is a gift for actors. It means that although you're always using your imagination, you can walk around it and get a feeling of what it is like to live in a place like that.
Jackson's vision of Tolkien's world was slowly built with plaster, prosthetics, and pixels. In the end, he got the authenticity he wanted.
Gandalf! You see past the pointy ears or the big hairy feet. You see real people, real races of hobbits or, you know, humans and elves and whatever.
You have my sword.
And you have my bow.
And my axe.
The different cultures of Middle-earth inspired the music of composer Howard Shore.
We've used ancient Dwarvish in Moria. It was sung by a Maori Samoan choir. We used Elvish, Sindarin, and Quenya in the score. I wanted it to have a feeling of antiquity, and I wanted it to have a historical feel.
What can you see?
For the end of The Return of the King, Shore co-wrote a haunting ballad for singer Annie Lennox.
Annie Lennox had a certain sound to her voice that, to me as a composer, there was a Galadriel connection.
Wow, that's beautiful, isn't it?
Peter Jackson's inspiring vision even won over some of the project's biggest skeptics.
When I first heard there was going to be a movie made, I thought, well, this is such an important book to me, and I couldn't imagine how anyone could bring that to life in a way that would satisfy me. And when I turned up in New Zealand to wander around Weta Workshop, it was like walking into Middle-earth, the best possible creation of Tolkien's world.
Tolkien himself might have deeply identified with the ongoing struggle to get each script right. Like the original novel, it was a process of constant revision.
He's like, an act.
An
See,
act?
look,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
See, this here is all written here. You see, it's so obvious.
In pen. 10 minutes ago.
That's the way that Pete and Fran and Philippa work, that they like to feel that nothing's locked in stone, and so that if they can improve something, they will.
Whatever happens, stay with me.
On both page and screen, the challenge was to focus on the human drama within the spectacle.
No man can kill me.
I am no man. Everything about it is huge, but yet at the core of it is the most tiny emotional journey that all these characters that you've got to know are all taking.
I didn't think it would end this way.
End? No, the journey doesn't end here. Death is just another path. One that we all must take.
So in the middle of this greatest war, you have all these characters that you know making their paths through it.
I think that what's great with this story is that it's been a balance of both the epic and the personal. The Battle of Pelennor Fields taking place with millions of people on this massive plain. And in the foreground, there were two little figures climbing this mountain.
Come on, Mr. Frodo. I can't carry it for you. But I can carry you. Come on!
After the battle outside the gates of Mordor and the hellish climax inside Mount Doom, it might have been tempting to send audiences home on a high note, but that wasn't how J.R.R. Tolkien finished his story.
Professor Tolkien said that when he was pushed, because he hated sort of answering questions like this, I believe, that the theme of this book is death.
Glad to be with you, Samwise Gamgee, here at the end of all things.
Although we have made some significant changes, we've tried to be faithful and true to the spirit of that end of that book.
It's a story about a world and a universe which is now changing, but not necessarily changing for the better.
There are some things that time cannot mend. Some hurts that go too deep, that have taken hold.
Do the hobbits ever get to go back home again? Go back to the Shire? Unfortunately, not without being changed themselves.
Frodo carries with him the scars of the journey. As good as it is for him to be free of that evil, a sense of that will always be with him.
If victory is to be achieved, there will have to be certain losses, and there will be certain debts that have to be paid to fate, to time, to death. But what it glories is loyalty, courage, and the willingness not to give up.
Never thought I'd die fighting side by side with an elf.
What about side by side with a friend?
I could do that.
That's what's interesting, and that's what will last. I mean, 50 years from now, there'll be some special effects that may or may not seem dated. It won't really matter because the emotional through line, the truthfulness, is what will last.
Lovely last shot.
When post-production on The Return of the King finally wrapped in 2003, the fellowship of the cast was over. But the actors, like their characters, were changed by their shared experience.
You don't go into something like this knowing that you're going to have such strong friendships formed, with people.
The fellowship, in a lot of ways, became a reality. It became a group of people who cared very much for each other, and in a lot of ways mirrored the journey of their characters.
Okay, here we go. We're going to shoot a couple of shots like this.
When you look at those early photographs or stills, there's an untested look in people's eyes, which I think is right and good in terms of how that serves the story, because when you see us by the end of The Return of the King, you're going to see, the wear and tear, and I think that's good.
The work is over, but the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, and The Return of the King remain.
In a way, I see Peter Jackson as part of the process which was begun by Tolkien when he first wrote the first line of that book. This is the story living in a different medium. What I hope is that people will see the film and say, what Peter Jackson has captured, what his actors have personified, is something which is really the heart, the spirit of the book.
Like the books, the films have touched a chord in millions of people.
It's been really moving for me to have kids think I'm a real princess. It's so incredible. Maybe my children will someday be able to watch this and I'll be cool. Mom will be cool elven princess.
But with Colin, people, you know, just generally people have come up and said, God, that's me. That's absolutely me. And which is quite surprising, you know.
I'd just love to see what J.R.R. Tolkien would have made of the films if he'd been given an opportunity to see them. I strongly suspect that he would have been as caught up with them as anybody else. Don't think of Lord of the Rings as a fantasy. Don't think of it as a long-got myth that never actually happened. Just know that Middle-earth exists, or existed. And it's happening as you're watching it.
We have made a trilogy that will live, I think, as long as film lives.
For Frodo.
What can you see on the horizon? Why do the white gulls call across the sea?
All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
The ship